Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ventures. I'm excited about this episode with Andrew Cronk. He is one of the co-founders of Figment, and Figment is ushering in the Web 3.0 era. And we talk about what is Web 3 in this episode, blockchains, proof of stake, how to develop on-chain these days. And a lot of people are talking about the price of various coins. You know, Elon Musk is, getting in the game and kind of poking fun at it himself. But that's not what's super interesting to me and Andy and the folks at Figment. What's super interesting is what are blockchains enabling for us as humans? What is the value being created? What are the cool projects that are being worked on right now that are going to really move the needle and provide all kinds of services and products and new technologies to build new products and services on in the future? So we have a wide-ranging conversation and get into a lot of detail. I'll make sure to put the links and the names of the various things that he talks about in this episode in the show notes. So if you're watching, you can also listen anywhere that you get your podcasts. You can just search for Ventures. And if you're listening, you can also watch by visiting wclittle.com. And there you'll see even more extensive show notes to the things that we've talked about today. And Andy's been on a couple episodes before, so I'd encourage you to check those out. So with that, please enjoy this conversation with Andy Cronk. All right, Andy, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Will. Really glad to be back. Excited to share the latest and greatest from all things Web3 and crypto.
I'm excited about this episode for a whole variety of reasons. This is the third time having you on, and I love having you on for a whole variety of reasons, but partially because it's really hard to get news about Web 3.0. It seems like everybody's talking about price and different aspects of kind of what's going on with the markets, but that's not really that interesting to me. What's interesting about that whole world is what this is going to enable for humanity, how this is going to actually provide value for us. And so, for those who don't know you and don't know about Figment, would you mind just sharing a little bit about your background and what Figment does?
Sure, yeah, happy to. So Figment has been working in the blockchain space for a little over 3 years. We started with a key insight, and the key insight was if we can create more blockchains and iterate wildly and rapidly, maybe we can find more killer use cases for decentralization. And so off that basic insight, we picked a technology. The technology is called proof of stake. And we made a basic bet that said, in the future, all new blockchains will be launched with this proof of stake technology. And if we get really good at mastering proof of stake, some business use cases will arise, and we can launch a bunch of new networks and see what sticks. And so we did that. So we started by doing something called validating or staking. We became a node on these new blockchains. There's a business model around this, which is if you run a node, you get to cut of the transaction fees. Very similar to like if you imagine the MasterCard or Visa network, when you swipe a card, part of that is a fee that goes to the network. Very similar in these decentralized networks, except for you can run a node, anyone can run a node. It's permissionless, and you can get a cut of the fees. That's a really nice business for us now. We're on around 50 networks today, doing validating or staking on proof of stake networks. So the first thesis is sort of coming true. Almost all new blockchains are launching using this proof of stake technology, and Figment is an operator, validator on these networks, which is great. And it's definitely our bread and butter. Is where we started, and we sort of grown from there. We grew from there in two ways. After we started launching all these networks, the next question was, are you sure they're working? Who's using them? Is anyone sending transactions? Who are the actual other operators and validators on this network? So we created some analytics software. It's called Hubble, like Hubble telescope. And Hubble is a way for you to get a view inside the networks, a very top-down, high-level view of what's happening. And that really solved the problem of who's using these networks, who are the good operators, things like that. But really, we kept pulling the thread and said, okay, if we're trying to discover killer apps for blockchain and using this proof of stake technology, we really need to bring developers on board, and we need to let them build on top of this infrastructure. So what's the blockchain developer platform? And our answer is a product called DataHub, and DataHub now offers blockchain development tools on 15 different networks. It's been growing really, really rapidly. It's probably our fastest growing product right now. And to really turbocharge that, the last thing we've done is we said, well, how do we create more blockchain developers? And so we created a site called Learn, or Figment Learn, where you can go from not knowing anything about blockchain. Really, step 1, install Node.js on your computer. Step 5, deploy a smart contract. And we've done that system, I think, on 6 different blockchains so far. And we even pay you tokens when you're done, so you can start interacting with the chains. And so that's a quick summary about Figment. But basically, we want to see more blockchains launched in the world. We really are sort of bought into this vision of Web3. We could talk about Web3 and what that means to us. But yeah, for us, proof of stake blockchains are an instantiation or one version of how Web3 could come to play.
Awesome. So I refer listeners and watchers back to the previous episodes when we talked about like what is a blockchain, differences between proof of stake and proof of work, et cetera, et cetera. Just one question on that. Why proof of stake? Like, why did you double down there?
Right. And so when we started playing around in this space, I'll tell a side story and I'll get back to your main question. But we started playing around in this space because I got hooked on this idea of Web3. And here's what it means to me, which is a friend called me up. This is 2017. And they said, hey, I'm having a kid and I want to upload my kid's baby photos online. Where should I do it? If I put them on Facebook, they're going to do facial recognition on my kid and sell me diaper ads. And if I send them to you in Gmail, they're going to scan the contents of my message and also sell me ads. Where can I go online where I can own and control my data and I have a right to privacy? And in a joke, I said, well, can you stand up an FTP server? Which of course, that's not something you say that anyone's going to do. And so I started going down this rabbit hole of trying to answer this question, right? Where online do you as a user control and own your data and you have a right to privacy? And I didn't find very many places to do it. And to me, that's how I often frame up Web3 is around data ownership and right to privacy. But I started looking into this and I said, well, why is the internet designed the way it is? Why aren't more systems actually designed like email? Email is sort of a federated protocol. Anyone can run their own server. We don't have to be beholden to a handful of centralized players. And so that's how I got into this space, was really thinking about what Web3 meant to me and how can we move towards that? So I think decentralization is a theme that fits in with that, or at least an approach to try to get towards this internet where users are in control of their data and have a right to privacy. And when I started going into decentralization, 2017 was also the last really hot time for blockchains. And so I just started reading all about them. And of course, the first thing you do after you read about it is you try to stand up a miner. I was mining on my laptop, didn't work at all. But then we started doing a lot more proof of work mining in a larger way. And then I started playing this out and I said, well, I don't think that very many blockchains can launch using proof of work. And the reason why is because if you try to compete with Ethereum or Bitcoin, you can get 51% attacked pretty quickly. And so, and also it's very, very expensive to launch a chain that way. And so I said, how do we reduce the costs of launching a chain without compromising on security? And that's what led me to a lot of the research around proof of stake. And of course, the Ethereum community has been looking at this for a very long time. But we've made a bet that you can launch chains cheaper, faster, quicker, all those things by utilizing this technology. And that bet has really played out true so far. I mean, proof of stake is still an early technology, but it seems like 99 out of 100 new chains sort of launch with proof of stake, it seems like, or 99%. And so, that's kind of how we got to it. I was thinking about this Web3 idea. I thought maybe the best way to get to it was to sort of launch a lot of chains, experiment wildly, and see what happens. And that's how we got to it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are defining Web3 different ways. Like I remember I started a coffee shop in Seattle around 2010, and I hosted a bunch of meetups with the Semantic Web folks. And
right.
they have a claim to Web3, they say, and then other people are trying to loop in AI and XR into the whole. Is it fair to kind of loop into those things, or does it matter, or how are you thinking about just or are you specifically focused on the data ownership and privacy?
Yeah. I love that there's a lot of people vying for Web3 because it means that they want the internet to be better. And I think that's kind of what we all want. And I have to scope it down to even though it's very high level vision when I talk about, ownership of your data and right to privacy online. All these other things you're mentioning are super important too. And I think they can all fit together. And so, yeah, I'm not trying to like push any specific definition of Web3, but that's what it means to me. And like if I even resume out, it's like to me, it's a re-decentralization of the internet, the way it used to be, or the way it was sort of originally envisioned. And so that's how I take it. But you know, the things to me, AI is sort of orthogonal, and VR and XR. Yeah, I think that to me is like an iteration on the UI. But you know, if I had to try to munge all that together, I'd start using words like metaverse and really going deep into metaverse. And I think that will combine data ownership, VR, AR, AI, all that kind of stuff. And so if I'm having to you know kind of dive into the semantics of this and try to put things in buckets, that's how I would do it. And to me, Web3 is mostly around user data ownership and privacy.
So what can we do right now? We, meaning the collective developer community, we're trying to build new things. We have ideas about what we can do with data and identity, self-sovereign identity. Is it possible? I think I've asked you this question before, but I'm not sure if we did it on a podcast. Is it possible now to build that future that we're talking about, or are we still at the protocol stage?
Right. This is what I'm really excited about. I think, you know, with each passing quarter, more and more the answer is yes. And the reason is because I think what we've seen in the past 3 years, you know, our original thesis was more new blockchains launched using proof of stake. Yes. But now that we have these like all these options for these sort of base chains or layer one chains, things are getting built on top. And as the more and more abstractions we build, the better things that developers will have tools to build things that actually impact end users and not just, you know, building for other developers. And so here's the things I'm really excited about seeing. And I think our enabling technologies, which will allow us to kind of bring on more developers. The things I'm really excited about are the ability to bring more information on chain. And so what I mean by that is, when we had Bitcoin originally, it was a ledger for essentially balances. You could track token balances on Bitcoin. And Ethereum abstracted that concept and said, well, now you can track the state of anything. You know, step by step, we're going to track the state of these variables or the state of this thing. But really, those are all about tracking things that were already on chain. And so the next big area that I'm really excited about is how do we bring more stuff into that paradigm? How can we bring more stuff into this verifiable ledger? How can we bring more stuff on chain? And I think there's two key technologies which have really been iterated on rapidly, which are going to be great new tools for developers to build with. So one of them is the concept of an oracle. So an oracle is a way to come to consensus about things that happened off-chain and to sort of bring it on-chain as a verifiable fact. So you could have an oracle, which really just means a group of individuals who attest to something. Now, we all attest that the outcome of this election was, you know, 51% votes this person, 49% votes that person, and then that becomes a fact on chain. And the way that we can do that is through there's different ways of doing consensus, but basically with a large enough group and with users staking through game theory, like you can actually use these as representative facts. And so the way you're seeing this come to market is a lot of new prediction markets are a lot more advanced. You can have, you know, a prediction market about the outcome of very specific things. And using oracles, using groups of people to come to consensus, you can bring new data online. So I'm really excited about that trend. The first use of oracles, if you've ever heard of a project like called Chainlink, there's another one called Band. Where they really started was to bring the price of tokens online. It's sort of funny, but the price is not really anything to do with the blockchain. The price of Bitcoin is not something that's on the chain. Price exists in external exchanges, things that are outside of the chain. And so in a blockchain like Ethereum, you can actually import price onto the chain so you can do things with it. You can do programmable contracts against price if you bring it in through these oracle systems. And so I think oracles as a source of truth, an arbiter of truth, bringing things into the sort of on-chain or ledger environment, I think those are going to be very, very popular. Yeah, so look out for a lot more oracle projects, I think, or at least oracles that enable you to do more things. And there's a bunch of them launching. The second key piece of technology I'm looking at and really watching excitedly is this concept of a zero knowledge proof. So zero knowledge proof is a way for an individual or someone to make a claim about something that they want to have sort of verified online, but without revealing the data. So example is like, let's say I wanted to make a claim that said, you know, I did over 1,000 steps on my Fitbit today, but I don't want to actually reveal any of my health data. And so the way you could do that is to say, hey, look, I want to say, I want to have a proof that says, yes, I did this, but I don't want to actually reveal the data. And that's a good way to do it. Another example is you might have seen some things in DeFi where there's people who are getting automatic loans, but you have to over collateralize the loan, right? I put in 1,000 and I can get a loan on 500 or something like that. I've seen projects which are taking your credit score. Credit score is a concept that exists off chain, and really doing zero knowledge proof that says, I guarantee my credit score is above 600 or 750, and then using that proof without revealing your credit score. And so you can then have that as something you can operate with on chain. I could then do a contract that says, if credit score above X, then release loan or something like that. And so I'm really excited about one, oracles, and two, these sort of concepts of zero knowledge proofs as a way to get more data on chain that we can do more programming against.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So because we have a group, right? We're coming on 300-400 people that are investors, founders, subject matter experts, consultants, freelancers, like people that are growing this ecosystem of innovation and entrepreneurship. And we're trying to figure out how we can communicate most effectively. And as we're builders and we want to build something that's going to be valuable for folks, we're wondering, as we evaluate the different options that are out there, and we're thinking about maybe building our own tool, we'd love to build it in a Web3 way. But is it possible to do that? Like let's maybe take topic by topic. Identity. How would we capture people's identity? Do we need to create a new identity on our own siloed app, or is it possible to use something other than one of the big Web 2.0 players for identity right now?
Right. Yeah. So many roads for me lead back to identity. And it's not just having sort of a source of truth about who I say I am, but all of the sort of surrounding stuff around that. What if I lose access to my password? How do I recover it? Sort of building these sort of webs of identity, I think is one of the most powerful things. And there are a few projects tackling this. It's a huge problem. And the way it's coming to market is sort of, it's sort of a login with something. Log in with your Ethereum wallet, there's other systems which I can share the links to, but they're trying to create these different places where everyone refers back to. So what happened if you remember when Facebook launched Facebook Connect, wildly popular, don't have to create a new password to log into anywhere. But then, of course, Facebook tracked you across the entire internet. It was sort of a Trojan horse for them. Yeah. I think people are trying to take the good parts of that Facebook Connect idea, which was you have a built-in social graph and you don't have to create a new account. Right. And you are then just sort of in a much more atomic way giving out permission to read these parts of my profile, kind of like similar to what OAuth ended up becoming. Right. And so we're seeing this happen. I would say the phase here is clear market demand. Developers want these tools, unclear about the way this is actually going to succeed, which standard is going to win. Right. And so right now, if I was sitting down with you on Monday and trying to come up with how Proto should do this, I could point to like maybe 2 or 3 different websites which are trying to approach this. But what I would say is where I spend most of my time thinking is not just about like, okay, what's the standard, how we represent all the metadata about ourselves, name, email, addresses online, and more about what happens when things get screwed up. What happens when I lose access to my keys or I forget my password or some of these sort of social recovery features. And so there's a lot of really cool cryptographic solutions to this problem. Some ones you might have heard of, like the key splitting with like Shamira's secret sharing, or like TSS, threshold signatures is another one, MPC, multi-party computation. The fact that I'm using acronyms that make no sense show the state of where we are right now, in that it's not ready for mass adoption, right? And so, but everyone agrees that solving identity is one of the key problems. And so, contrast that with what I said before, talking about oracles and zero knowledge proofs, where I think those are developer-ready tools. It's not yet clear to me what the right tools are for identity, self-sovereign identity, and how that's going to roll out. I don't quite see it yet, except for the thing that I do know is that everybody wants it, which means that it's going to come sooner or later. And I think the reason why now is the right time to be working in this space is because we have, we've launched all the layer 1 protocols. We're getting some of the developer tools in place. Like I mentioned, our software DataHub, we're trying to make it easy for developers to create things. And we're finally touching end users now. Right now, the only way that blockchain and crypto has touched end users is through exchanges and trading. right? And you don't really have to know about these kind of concepts. But to move to a more decentralized world where you're actually using decentralized apps, an exchange is not a decentralized app. We have to sort of solve this identity problem. And so I think now, and especially in the next 6 months, there's going to be a lot of people working on this.
Well, yeah, I'm excited to get those links and put them in the show notes, because I definitely want to tinker around with that. If there's a way to set up that personal metadata in some kind of layer 1 or layer 2 thing, and then use that as an OAuth to log in to some decentralized app that hopefully we can build, even if it's super clunky. Like, I'm highly interested in building that, or working with whatever team is building that right now.
Yes. I just remembered. So the thing to look up is something called ceramic.network, which came out of some previous other products, but this is a decentralized approach to this. So Ceramic is the one that I've been following. There's other ones too, but that's one that I really like so far.
Cool. All right. So then that would be on the in the paradigm that people are used to. You log in with something, maybe you control that data. You can, and we figured out a way that if you lose your password, you can. But then what about the data? Let's say we set up a forum or some kind of chat application, and we're typing in data. We're typing in our comments and our chats. Is it possible to store that data on chain somewhere, as some kind of layer 1, layer 2, layer 3 thing, or would that have to sit on AWS or some cloud technology?
Right. So a couple approaches here. One approach would be the data is only ever stored and served from a P2P network. So in this case, it'd be, I'm running a client on my laptop, you're running a client on your laptop, and the data is not stored on a third-party server. It exists only within a peer-to-peer network, which kind of is how, remember like Kazaa and the original Napster? I'm pretty sure that's how it worked, right? There were no servers to shut down. That's why it was so hard to get rid of the dang thing, because it was sort of like BitTorrent, I think, where parts were stored in a P2P network. So you could do that. That involves pretty advanced clients. What I mean by that is to say, you would probably not do that through your web browser. You'd probably not do that, using like the web storage that's available in your web browser. You'd probably have to have people download something, right? And so there's been approaches to do this, specifically around chat and other things like that. And that can work. I don't foresee that working because, if too many of us sort of shut down our little network, if our network is 6 nodes and 4 or 5 go offline, then we might lose our data. But that is an approach that I've seen. A different approach is to store it in public places, but with sort of privacy built in. And so it's sort of this is sort of more of an encryption story. And so I think managing encryption keys kind of gets back to what we were talking earlier about identity. But this idea of, what if we stored everything sort of in public places, but no one could really get at it, and barring the sudden rise of quantum computing, I think this could be a workable approach for a while. And so essentially what you have is encryption at rest plus encryption in flight, and you could have a forum which is stored in a database or some sort of structure, some sort of file structure, which only certain people have access to. And I think that's a much more compelling approach. You can reuse so much of our existing infrastructure and so much of our existing software if we figure out encryption and decryption. And that's probably the approach I would take.
Are there chains right now that developers could put that data on in a public place, but encrypted, to be able to build a hypothetical application like I'm thinking of?
Yeah. Right. So everyone has heard, I say everyone, a popular project in our space is called FileCoin or IPFS. But what I think is not getting as much hype as it should are some of the alternatives, which are actually much more usable and much more user-friendly and ready to be developed on. 2 that I really watch. One is called Arweave, Arweave, Arweave. They have a really compelling approach. I think this is sort of next to this sort of encryption idea, but look to Arweave. I think some really, really cool things are getting built on there. And the other one is called Sia, SIA. They have a project called SkyNet, which is really getting mass adoption now, and sort of I think could be a way to build forward here. So everyone thinks about IPFS as sort of the S3 replacement, but I think there's so much more we can do and better APIs we can create. And so I'd look at those 2 projects as probably where I'd start.
Because then decentralized application developers are going to have to figure out some way to replicate the database, right? The SQL equivalent in order to query this data effectively. Is there is there ways right now that people are working on that, or in terms of?
Yes. I'm really glad you asked. So there's a few projects that are working on this, and I think I'll just share this in the show notes. But there's a few different projects which are building on top of IPFS and doing this, and there's a few different projects which are building on different storage systems. But the short answer is yes. I think the relational database is obviously a great invention, and recreating it in a key value store is something we tried to do in the original big data wave, and we realized actually we just want SQL interfaces on top of this. And so I think in my mind, SQL interfaces are here to stay. Nobody wants to develop on top of KV stores. But what we have right now is essentially we're back to KV stores in crypto world. And so I'll share links to a couple of number of databases which are sort of taking this more relational, or at least having a SQL interface approach. But yeah, that's sort of where we are in the market right now.
That's exciting, because those are those pieces. Yeah. Some kind of querying and structured data, a place to actually store that data, and a way to deal with identity. If you have those three pieces, we can start recreating all these Web 2.0 applications on chain and get more data on chain, get more people familiar with it, get more developers on it. And that's very exciting. So that's cool. I'm excited to get and put all that information in the show notes. And I'm excited to tinker it with myself this summer. That'll be fun. So
what I would say is the one nuance here is where your application logic runs. And so I don't mean to be sort of pedantic about it, but the one way to think about smart contracts is it's much more like the serverless paradigm than I'm deploying my app onto EC2. And a way to think about a smart contract is just like serverless, right? You execute functions which need to execute in some sort of finite amount of time, and then you store the results of some store, which you can kind of pull back from later. And so I don't think it's as simple as, now I have my Ruby on Rails app in Web3. I think it's much more around we have to take some of what's available with smart contracts. And really, if you tried to do anything on AWS Lambda or any of these sort of function-based systems, it's a different approach. And so I think that's going to have to be one nuance. Is I don't think we're going to have Rails for blockchain, but we will have something that could be sort of Lambda for blockchain.
Yeah, that's great. So Figment has announced some pretty amazing news with regard to the new fund, right? As part of the whole mission to get more people using blockchains, more people innovating on it. Tell us about the fund. Who are you trying to invest in, and how is this helping advance the Web3 mission?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So, Will, you were there in the beginning, but in 2018 we tried to start a fund, but we weren't successful. And we started a fund with the basic pitch, which was we want to be an operational fund. We don't want to just be money. We want to, the tagline on our pitch deck said we invest capital and hash power, and hash power is in quotes, but basically says we want to put money and we want to run as a node on your network. That was the whole pitch. And we started trying to raise money from investors, and they said, I don't know if you'll be a good investor, but clearly you've run infrastructure businesses. Why don't you just start there? And so we dropped the investing part, and we just did the sort of node operation part, and that's our staking business we said in the beginning. And that was going really well. And we started investing in companies off of our balance sheet. And why would we invest in a company? Well, we're running infrastructure. We're trying to get a new blockchain launched. They need capital. They need the infrastructure. So we're providing infrastructure, but we're missing the capital. And so it's a natural extension. We've been doing this anyways. And so we wanted to formalize it into a fund, just to let projects know, hey, if you're looking for someone who can partner with you in a couple ways, we're trying to build this stack of services for blockchains. One, we'll be there on your test nets. We'll help you iterate. We'll run servers. We'll get you going. Two, to help sort of fuel development, here's an infusion of cash. Off you go. Three, we'll launch an analytics layer for you. We'll launch a Hubble, our block explorer for you, so people can actually see your network. It's not real until people can see it, right? And then we'll do DataHub, which will help developers come to your network. And then we'll do Learn, which will help developers learn about your network. And so everything we do is in service of getting more blockchains launched, getting adoption for blockchains. We only win if more of these things launch and get traction. And so everything we're doing is in that vein. And so money was just a simple missing piece that we filled in.
I love that. That's great. And where can people learn specifically about the fund if they wanted to learn more about that?
Yeah. So we call it Figment Capital. So if you just Google Figment Capital, you'll find it. Our website is figment.io, and it'll be linked from there too. And so, our goal here is that we just kind of let more people know that we're doing this. We've been doing it informally, and now we just want to make it sort of more formal, more known, because we think all these things are important. And a lot of what we're doing is drafting off or matching what you've set up with Proda, which is supporting companies in different ways, right? Sometimes they need this, sometimes they need that, and it's sort of a multi-tiered approach. But it seems that if we're in the business of helping these things launch, helping things grow, all these services seem like they're required.
I love it.
Yeah.
So in a previous episode, I think at the end, I think our first talk, which I think was episode 2, you mentioned a story about Jeff Bezos wanting to do something different with expanding the bookstore concept, right? He basically said, hey, how can we use this internet to do more than just share cat photos and such? Is there a way to actually bring value? So he was thinking about we could basically sell in a infinite number of SKUs and use this internet thing in a way that's actually going to be valuable. What ways are you seeing that more than just decentralized finance are being put on chain? Like, what new exciting projects are out there that you're interested in or following that blockchains are enabling that wasn't possible before?
Yeah. So since we last talked, I have to say the word NFT at least once on this episode, because it's even if it's come and gone, I think there's going to be a lot of long-lasting ramifications of it. When you hear the word NFT, what I want you to think about is just a different word, which is just provenance. Ownership trail is a way to think about it, and verified ownership. And so this actually gets back to our previous conversation about identity. Everyone has probably heard the word Beeple, as an artist name, but how do you know that it's actually that artist who launched something? How do you verify identity? How do they track their identity online? And so all these pieces are coming together around identity plus ownership trail, and so that I think is going to be applied to much more than just you've seen it in art. You've seen it in collectibles. Essentially, people traded Pokemon cards. Now they trade NBA Top Shots online. And so I think that NFTs are going to start out in these realms, but they're going to likely move into other parts of our life, which are maybe more business oriented. We've seen NFTs around invoices. We've seen them around other sort of legal contracts, things like that. As we have we bring more data on chain via oracles and zero knowledge proofs, I imagine that this sort of NFT construct will become more important. The things that I don't see coming online will be like, your car title or, ownership of a house. I think those are sort of further out. But I think things that can be represented digitally natively are much more likely to move into this paradigm. And so I wanted to at least say NFT once on this podcast because if I didn't, I feel like I'd be missing the boat. So that's one thing I'm pretty excited about. The other thing, the other area is I've seen a lot more happening around what I'll call mutualization, or sort of another way to look at it is like insurance. We're seeing all sorts of weird and cool things get insured by people putting money together. So you might remember one of the big first use cases of Ethereum and blockchain in 2017 was fundraising, right? We're putting money together so that we can get some tokens and do something. I'm seeing pretty novel things become insured. There's something called Nexus Mutual, which is a really cool project to study. They're right now insuring like smart contract hacks and other things like that, but they're moving into more and more with the addition of oracles and more things that are happening off chain now being tracked on chain. You can insure all sorts of things, and so you're able to get these sort of interesting insurance contracts, which are then crowdfunded by other people who want to take those things on. And so another example, which is kind of way in the weeds, but there's a project called Unslashed Finance, and Unslashed is doing insurance on slashing for a validator. And anyone can sort of buy the risk of Figment right now. Figment runs validators. You can buy the risk of us getting slashed, and sharing the premiums if we don't get slashed. And so that's another trend that I've been really watching and really enjoying.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
So I'm particularly interested in this project called Helium, and it seems like
Yep.
everybody wants to get one of these little devices, and they're freakishly back ordered.
Yeah.
I'm assuming you're familiar with the project, and kind of what's your overall take on what they're up to, and maybe explain a little bit for those who aren't familiar.
Sure, yeah. So one thing I'll say about Helium is it launched without a proof of stake or staking component, and they're really launching with a new staking component. And I think it kind of goes to what I was saying earlier, which is it's how you attract more players into your project. And so let me describe a bit about how I understand Helium and what I think they're going to do next. Helium originally started with a focus on Wi-Fi or wireless and trying to create a wireless overlay network in different areas of the country. And so the way they did that is through a token motivating people to run these hotspots and sort of subsidizing that with the token. And so, will you throw up a hotspot in a place where you think people might use it, and you verify that it's, other people verify that it's running, and then you get paid to do that. And this is sort of like how right now, if you're mining in like Bitcoin or Ethereum and there's no transactions in your block, you still get a block reward. You're still motivated to like run a miner, even if there's no transactions. Of course, those networks now have transactions, and I think that's what Helium wants to go do is they want to first motivate people to run these things, and then they want to motivate people to optimize and run them in locations where they'll actually have people hitting these endpoints. So they started with Wi-Fi, and that was great. What they've really taken off with is they switched a focus to a bit on 5G. And kind of moving more towards cellular. And the reason for that is if you study 5G at all, you'll realize that the 5G penetration in most places, especially cities, is super, super low. Mm-hmm. And the fact that like the people actually advertise this is kind of a joke, like the big cellular companies, because most people aren't on 5G most of the time, are making use of it. And so, Helium, I really think started taking off when they sort of found this. They said, okay, yeah, Wi-Fi is great, and we can motivate a Wi-Fi network, but really, you can get Wi-Fi most places when you sit down, right? Wi-Fi is mostly a sedentary technology. 5G is a true mobile technology, and you want it as you're moving about places. And so I think that's part of the reason why they took off recently, is to focus on that and really just the demand of users. Like, yes, I actually want a high-speed wireless connection. And so the way you think about Helium is that they're trying to, at the most bold way to talk about it is they're competing directly with AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile by trying to create a decentralized radio network that doesn't rely on super tall poles, but instead a bunch of a mesh network that's distributed around a place where people are.
Because fundamentally, they're getting the source of their internet from traditional internet providers and then just sharing it around, or are they hacking into it, or not necessarily hacking into it, but are they drawing from original sources of bandwidth? Do you know those details?
No, I don't know the details. The one thing I'll say is, did you see the cool project where someone had a Helium radio that was backed by StarLink, the sort of new satellite internet wireless?
I heard about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know the implementation detail of how they tap in sort of backhaul. That's something I haven't got into, but I've just seen that there are different backhauls you can set up.
Yeah, cool. So what's next for Figment? What can you tell us about publicly that you're excited about the next season of ushering in Web3 and helping to create a better internet?
Yes, right. So I'd be remiss to say that I would be remiss if I didn't mention that we're hiring. We've been hiring like crazy. We want people who, we're hiring for all sorts of roles. We're hiring for marketing, we're hiring for research, we're hiring for software roles, hiring for DevOps roles. And you don't have to have any blockchain experience. We want people who are bought into, how I define Web3, which is sort of user privacy or user ownership of data and privacy in building this new kind of internet. And so we're looking for technical and non-technical people. One of the big challenges of being in this space is we're trying to bring more people into it. And so people who actually are learning while they're at Figment is a plus, because you're teaching people coming right behind you, right? If you've been someone like me who's been steeped in it for a couple of years, I kind of forget what some of these concepts are, and like the metaphors aren't as good, right? And so to me, newness to the space is fine. Excitement about how we could potentially build a different internet is what's actually required. And so that's what's coming next. We've hired a bunch this year. We're going to hire a bunch more. We want to expand to a lot more networks. There's tons of new networks launching. We want to be in all the important ones. We want to expand DataHub. We want to grow our developer community. One thing I didn't mention is that our strategy for DataHub and Learn is we want to build a developer community. And we've created an incentive structure where if you go through our tutorials and learn how to deploy a smart contract, we'll give you a handful of tokens. If you turn around and create a tutorial, we'll pay you, I think we pay $500 per tutorial. And so we have a whole community of people all over the world who are submitting these user-generated tutorials and are starting to do video walkthroughs. And we have, I think, around 3,000 developers now in our Discord who are doing this. And it's amazing to watch. When I did this exercise where I wrote our Q2 update at the end of Q1. And basically, I did this technique from Amazon where they before you launch a product, you write the press release.
Right.
I wrote the press release for Q2 before Q2 started. And one of the things I said in there is the first community started project inside of our developer community launches and gains traction. And that happened this quarter. So I'm very excited about that. I'm very excited about growing this developer community. So if we can get on more networks, we can teach more people about this sort of new paradigm. And then, of course, hire the team to fulfill it. That's what I'm really looking forward to.
That's amazing. Well, Andy, I am so amped about Figment, about what y'all are doing to bring in Web3. I'm amped to dive into the Learn tutorials myself, to tinker around, to hopefully participate in that developer community in that Discord channel. Is there anything else that you'd like the listeners or viewers to know about, things that are in your brain or questions that you're thinking about in this space?
Yeah. The thing I would say is I imagine I will talk briefly about price and what that means to what we're doing. It means nothing to what we're doing. The thing I would say is people talk about coins like Dogecoin and influencers like Elon Musk. To me, that's the same thing as GameStop. That's the same thing as people playing with stock prices, and it's really orthogonal and distracting to what we're trying to do. There's so much fundamental research happening, and my favorite thing about being in the space is we're deploying applied research. There's a lot of cutting edge things happening, and so the thing I would ask is if you are disillusioned by your portfolio going down and you don't know why, go and listen to a few podcasts and read about what's happening on Ethereum. There's two amazing things happening on Ethereum. One is called EIP 1559, Ethereum Improvement Proposal 1559. And there's a great podcast from Epicenter. So if you go to epicenter.tv and look up a recent podcast on EIP 1559, it's amazing what's happening. You look at something like Ethereum and you think wow, this is like a steady state mature protocol. They are aggressively modifying it to try to bring fees down, to try to get certainty around that. I'd look into that. And then I'd also look into the merge happening with Ethereum moving to proof of stake. And that's going to happen. I thought that was going to happen for a long time. I think that's going to happen. There's a chance it happens this year. And so I'm just really, really excited about all that stuff. Yeah. There's so much the recent mania in token prices have brought some people in. But I think people have missed some of these great fundamental research and new stuff that's going to be launching. So I'd really, if you're bummed out about buying tokens and you're bummed out about your portfolio, go check that out. It'll get you super amped again.
Love it. Well, Andy, appreciate it. Figment.io, learn.figment.io, and the new fund. We'll make sure to put all these notes in the show notes. Really appreciate your time. This has been great.
Thanks for having me on, Will. It's always good to talk.
All right, a couple quick things before you go. Number one, I have a general newsletter where I write about technology and startups and health science and teaching people to code. And I write about a variety of different subjects that we talk about on this show. So if you go to wclittle.com, there you'll be able to subscribe, and you'll also be able to subscribe to particular topics. If you're just interested in one or a few of them, you'll be notified right when I publish new content in those areas. Number two, my partners and I at Proto Ventures have a portfolio company called Startup Rocket. If you go to startuprocket.com, there you'll be able to receive coaching guides and customize an operations framework for you and your team and your advisors to be on the same page in terms of what is the appropriate next step for you and your entrepreneurial journey. And finally, if you wouldn't mind leaving a review anywhere that you have listened to this podcast or watched this podcast, it would be super helpful to help those who might be interested in consuming this content as well. Thank you.